My name is Tor Blystad. I'm a game developer of the last 20 years. Most recently I was working on the Hitman franchise in Copenhagen as a game director, art director, writer, etc. And now the last half year I tried to set up a studio in Shanghai, which had the kind of mixed results. So I decided to quit that, and I'm now kind of considering what the next move should be. If we should continue staying in Shanghai or go back to Europe or Scandinavia or something completely different. I mean, on the Hitman project, one of the tasks I had was setting up the outsourcing pipeline back in 2007. So we had some failures at the studio that we tried to outsource things and it didn't really work. The team internally, they hated it. The stuff we got back was not good. So we had demands from above that we had to outsource a certain percentage of the game. So we said, okay, fine, then we're going to do it right. We're going to make a new team internally that wants to send things out of the house, and we're going to go to China and find good partners and work closely with them so that we know the quality we get is good enough. So, like said, like done, we went there, the producer and me, and we had a whole kind of entourage of people coming from the studio. I think we were like 8 people going there in total. And we presented the same pitch that we presented to our publisher for the game. We found some partners that actually could deliver really high quality. And one of these producers over there was the guy that I later partnered up with. And he was a very kind of Western-oriented Chinese guy. And his team was very good. They delivered some really great quality for the game, some of the best assets that I've seen at the time. So I was very excited to see that this Chinese team could actually deliver some real world-class quality assets. And we kind of started toying with this idea of setting up a Chinese studio, making the same kind of high-quality games as we were doing in the West. And as the Hitman project was finishing, and he kind of started up by himself, and we later, came and joined the studio and brought ourselves into it, and with the goal of making, you can say, as the basic, you can say, money was coming from art outsourcing, but then building up a development arm that was going to be, you can say, the more interesting part where you can make your own IPs and also take on co-development projects from other studios. So this was, you can say, the strategy, and it was working well. I mean, we had some very good projects. We had we're building up the team. When I decided to leave, there was 50 people in the studio, so it was kind of growing kind of steadily. But it turned out that if it was consciously from their side or unconsciously, but at least a lot of the things that I had kind of assumed to be the truth sitting in Europe turned out that it was not as much truth. And the way, you can say, the kind of professionality in the production team was very different from a European team. The way to run, you can say, run the production and track the production and making sure that things were done properly. Also for the team's own sake, because you can say it was people are working very hard in China, and one reason for that, in my opinion, after being there now, is also that they don't have the same way of running a production team as in the West. It's very top-down, and if the top is not professional enough, then nothing will really work very well, and you have to make up in hard work instead of just, making sure that what you were doing in the first place was the right thing from the beginning. So this was kind of a painful lesson, and it was something where I felt kind of bad being a part of it, where people were driven so hard, and it could have been changed, you can say, to the better. And the copyright is not seen in the same way in China as it is in the West. That it's if someone makes a design, it's doesn't really matter who did it as long as you can produce it, and it's the end product that is the most important thing. And this kind of notion made it very hard for me, because some of the things that I thought the studio had done by themselves before we joined, that was basically something I found out they had taken it from somewhere else. And so these kind of different realizations of kind of the truth kind of emerged, and in the end I just found out it wasn't really worth it for how much I had to put in of an effort to make this work and how much I actually got back from my partners. So I decided that it was better to call it a day before it went really bad. And I was having a contact with a French game design school called Engmin, with a lot of very talented students that wanted to come and have an internship with me in the studio. And that was kind of happening, so I was getting more and more desperate, because these people are coming, then I can't really do anything, because then I'm locked for 6 months while they're there. So I was like, okay, fine, it has to be now. I'll just walk away and then find out what to do next. First of all, I choose the wrong partners, and I didn't do, you can say, a proper due diligence with what I was bringing to the table and what they were bringing to the table, and this made everything else, you can say, much less important. But in general, it was like, yeah, you have to know the economy, right? You have to be in charge of the economy in some way of the company, and or the people, because that's the two things, at least in this business, that matters the most. And if you can't speak the language, then it's very hard to control the people. So you can say I could control the people in the fact that I was the top creative in the company, and many people would like to work with me because I was coming from big games in the West. So, but still not understanding what people are saying when they're sitting around, the table, it makes it a lot harder. So that said, I mean, learning Chinese is not something you do overnight. So it was like on my to-do list, but I mean, my 3-year-old, he speaks fluently now after half year. But for me, for myself, I'm trying to catch up with him. So, but I think, I mean, one thing in retrospect was that the kind of trying to find a full dev team in China, it's really, really challenging, because they don't have the education system to deliver, you can say, to people. You have to find people, you can say, I mean, 20 years ago when I started out in game development, I mean, there was no education in Scandinavia. It was just people sitting at home, playing around with a Commodore Amiga or a PC that got a job, right? That's how it is in China now. You can't find a level designer or a game designer or a concept artist or a screenwriter or a composer. I mean, these things are really hard to come by. You can find animators that are working with traditional animation, but they might have problems working with mocap and cleaning up for games and doing proper facial animation for realistic games. So there's many, I mean, they're really good at producing a lot of stuff. If you know what you want and you can describe it very carefully, then you can get anything done. But that was also my basis for coming there. I say, okay, the projects we were doing was very based on the visuals, because I knew that's what I can find. That's at least that's going to be okay. But I didn't foresee how much direction that also was needing, because I was used to sitting in Scandinavia sending, you say, handouts with very specific requirements for every single asset that I was building. And I would basically have to sit and do the same thing in China, just to someone sitting on the other side of the table. And if I'm only me, I mean, it's there's a limit to how much I can actually do in 24 hours. So in retrospect, I think setting up something in China and possibly in Scandinavia and kind of combine it would be a more powerful solution. So I think it's a combination of many things. I mean, the what's called the culture and the kind of political situation is one thing. I think it does mean a lot and you can say the very how to say entrepreneurial spirit in China, because if I compare it with Scandinavia, which I've been doing a lot lately because I've been talking with the Norwegian embassy a lot and trying to see what is the difference, what are the key differences. And one thing, because I mean Norway is a very rich country, it has a very strong welfare system, meaning that anyone growing up, they don't really consider not having a job and not having money and having a place to stay. This is non-issues, you know, because if you can't get it yourself, someone will provide it to you. Meaning that you can focus all your energy on doing what you want to do. You know, you can take an education in what is you have some passion for and what's interesting you. And of course that means that the artists, for instance, working in game development, I mean, they are doing games because they love games, not because it was a best paid job. I mean, if you're a programmer, you would be better off working in a bank than in the game industry. But those programmers working in games, they do it because they really love it. In China, it's different because it's really, really tough. I mean, I have a lot of respect for Chinese, and I know what they have to go through in their life. I mean, from very early age, from like 3 or 4 years old, they're being told from their parents that when you grow up, you have to get a good education because you have to get a good salary, because you have to take care of your family when you grow old, and you have to take care of your kids. You have to pay for their education. Probably you have to buy them a house and a car so they can get married. All these responsibilities is on these little kids. That's why when they grow up, they know from the bottom of their heart they really have to do something where they make a lot of money. And this money, you know, if they get like seriously ill or something like that, like getting cancer, all that money is just gone from themselves, from all their family, because of some guy in the family had some serious illness, and then you have to pay the hospital and all the money just disappear, right? So that means there's never enough money. You always have to hoard more and more. And this means that when at least from Western Europe, kind of people going there, if they're not really good businessmen, they will be teaming up with some Chinese that are still thinking like this, but they will take everything out because that's what they do, you know, that's what they, you can say it's in their bones. While Western people tend to think more long-term and like you're generating some value and some ideas that you will develop over time, and they will give you back a lot because these are really, you know, unique and good ideas. But it seems to me that in China it's much more like, what can I get right now? You know, money in my hand is more important than 10 times this money tomorrow, because it's not real. You know, it might never come. And they're cheating each other all the time. So like the boss of a company is saying, yeah, like next year we're going to be like this and this, you get this, to get people to work harder, and then nothing happens and they leave and just hire someone else and do the same thing, right? Because there's an abundance of people. So I've been trying to be less mad with this thing and trying to think what is the real reason, you know, and it's in the system. I mean, my wife is Chinese, and she's been going through some really tough times in her life. Also making her having a big problem to actually trust anyone, because when she arrived in Shanghai with her bag and some money to live, the first thing that happened was that everything got stolen from her. She was just standing there, nothing, no ID card, no money, having to start from scratch, and going through these really tough things. I mean, if you told that to a guy in Western Europe, they will just like, they will not believe it's true. You know, how can you go through things like this? So that's why for Chinese people, it is a very different situation, and you take what you can. But there is actually a console market. That was a big surprise to me. I found out that one of the biggest game magazines in the world is actually in China. It's a console game magazine that it has a circulation of like 500,000 every 2 weeks. And this is a magazine that gets by with no advertising at all. It's only game content they sell. And there is a big grey imports market actually for console games in China that I had no idea. I thought everything was just pirate, but it's not. So, and now Sony and Microsoft, they're kind of competing for going into the free trade zone, and they have to manufacture their consoles in the free trade zone to be able to sell them in China, apparently. But I think within a year or two, there's going to be a console market as well. But of course, with all the pirating that's been going on, I mean, it's not it hasn't really been a market that you could think about before, but now I think it's going to come. And also Chinese people have a lot more money now. They have money to spend on these things, and they have the time. The young people, I mean, the second generation kind of rich kids in China, there's a lot of them, and they have a lot of money.